Herb's signature quality as a professor and as an author is that he's beguilingly simple. Clear ideas come across clearly, clear examples, and you think you've got it, and then you go home and try it on your kid, and it doesn't work. Right? And so I thought one of the things I could do is talk about Vital in that way. Vital seems very simple, right? And which is good, because simple technologies are the most powerful. They're easiest to distribute and make things to do with. But there's a lot going on in there, right? So it looks simple, but it's got some genius behind it. So my job is to help bring that out for you. And so just to make the point that simplicity is never simple, you can look at this, and then you see that, and it's pretty obvious what it is. It's a circle, right? And that's quite simple. But then it turns out it's a biggish circle. Turns out it's an empty circle. Turns out it's a circle with a black line. And then turns out it's a circle on the left side of the screen. So even though something seems very simple, there's a lot going on when you contrast it to the other alternatives. So contrasting case is a good way to see past the simplicity and get to the depth of the idea. And so I'm going to use some contrast to bring out the complexity of the decisions in the design of Vital. So in the first paper that I read but didn't see, I just want to point out that gratuitous citations to discussants are a good idea, especially when there's the one that says, sometimes we tell them and it cites me on that. So the goals for the students are to observe, understand theoretical treatments, and to interpret. And so a contrasting case as a different approach to doing early math education. So imagine that letters are numbers, so that A is a 0, B is a 1, C is a 2, D is a 3, all the way up. So for this problem, I don't want you to convert it to numbers. I just want you to use letters as though you were a young child just learning numbers. What letter is the answer to R minus F? So it'll take you a couple of seconds to realize how hard this is. So you're doing this sort of stuff. Did you track? Right. So this is an experiential approach to understanding the child. As an instructor, I try and put you in the position of what it must be like and how difficult it is. And the goal is to experience what it's like for the child. This is not Vital's approach. Vital is an objectivist approach. The goal is to observe it and interpret in light of theory. So your task is not to feel how difficult it is for the child. It's to make an account of what the child does. So clinical interviewing has been Herb's method of instruction, which is also his method of research. And so this is not uncommon, where we take our own method of research and we turn it into instructional method. Right? So I'm an experimentalist, and so the way I teach is I have students do experiments. So this is very common among researchers. It's not a bad move, it's just worth recognizing. So for PhD students, this is an ideal way to learn because they're learning method, clinical interview, and content together. So this is perfect. For teachers, it's not absolutely obvious to me that this is the best approach. So the researcher goal is to go from observation to theoretical description. The teacher's goal is to go from observation to action. So you could imagine a different kind of video clip, one where the student's job is to say what kind of instruction might help the child. The video stops, and then they make their prediction, and then they show what instruction helps. I'm just drawing contrast here. I'm not saying which is better. So, Joon, this was a really well-written, close-up look at the different components of the instructional sequence. The initial case, the alternative hypothesis presented by others, new evidence, and then conclusions. I thought it was a great precursor to research that's going to examine the active ingredients in Vital, trying to figure out which parts are doing a lot. She used very smart categories. It's good. It'll be good to find out if they can be reliably coded. It's also good to consider the implication of commingling two types of coding schemes. One is a mutually exclusive scheme. It's plausible or implausible. Another is more of an attribute scheme where you can check off multiple attributes for an event. And commingling these can be very problematic when you come to data analysis. So it's worth thinking this through. It's useful to have some alternative hypotheses going forward. So one that runs through all these papers is, are changes due to increased content knowledge or is it due to increased experience with vital? Right, so when I took Herb's course, there was no vital, but I still learned. Personally, I would focus on the expert commentary. So once upon a time, so let me point out, this is a particular genre of expert commentary. Once upon a time, I made something that had some superficial similarities. There's a video case, you wrote down your initial ideas, and then you heard expert commentary. So our experts did something different. They would talk about all the things, they would open up the space. So I would have a baby in a crib crying, and I'd have an animal researcher describe what they noticed versus someone who does psychotherapy versus a cognitive psychologist. And they would open up the space for inquiry. So in Vital, the experts are designed to focus on specific hypotheses. It's a different kind of expert role. And so I think this nicely fits the goal of improving research thinking. Hypotheses, rival hypotheses, new evidence, conclusions. So it fits well with this notion of focusing in on particular phenomena. And so the last two papers are whether Vital improves research thinking or at least the use of the technology in context of research thinking. So Michael examined changes over the courses of assignments. He's developing a methodology for a coding scheme. I thought they were great categories for a focus on research or scientific thinking. Claim, evidence, relation, reflection. It was good. It was a good combination of sort of scientific moves plus cognitive moves. Again, I have the same question about reliability. There's got to be a lot of margin calls. And so this will be an important thing to stabilize before you put all your eggs in the basket. So what are the students learning? He found that I thought the interesting finding is that the number of claims go up, or go down, and the use of evidence goes up. So this is good. Grounding your claims in data is a good thing. And as that happens, as you have more pieces of data to the same claim, it seems like you're going to get more relational statements to fall out of that pretty naturally. So that's good too. So what's the contrast that can bring out the uniqueness of this approach? Well, he was coding scientific thinking, in this case, clinical interviewing research thinking. We'll call it SIRT. He could have been coding knowledge integration. How much are they bringing in the prior knowledge they learned in the course? Right? And so it's a focus on a particular thing. I think you could get at their knowledge by changing the essay task a little bit so that there would be more evidence for them to show their knowledge, and then you could code that as well. And so the reason I think this is big is that TC has this love of scientific thinking as a general Piagetian type of thing, I guess. But there's big dogs hunting out there, right? And they're after this idea that this scientific thinking is a thing in its own right. And so, one alternative is that topical knowledge, you need that before you can do the scientific thinking. And it's your knowledge of the domain that's driving all of this. Scientific thinking, except for one little trick about considering alternatives, right, just may not be that difficult. So I thought, given the longitudinal nature of the data, it might be interesting to see the relationship and the rise of the scientific thinking and the knowledge in the students in the class. And so I just made this up. But so you can imagine that if you coded over different sessions, the scientific thinking and the knowledge manifestation may have various relationships. This is not meant to entail any specific claim. It's just to give you an idea. So I'm going to get rid of it with the evidence eliminator, which you can. It's just too much. So this is the effective technology on learning. It takes a critical incident approach, and you probe at two different points in this study, which I thought was a very clever idea. I'm guessing the probe was something like describe a recent incident during which vital environment was particularly useful in helping to learn. So the probe pulls for a positive response. So you might think that's bias, but it's okay because the goal is to see whether vital's usefulness changes over time. But I'm not so fond of the probe, sorry. The incidents aren't critical, right? And so they're open to various interpretations of the task demand. Can I say the same thing as before? Nothing really comes to mind, but I should say something. And so this may have to do with some of the watered downness of the results. I also wonder if more actionable probes would be useful for the designers. So as an evaluator, you can sort of say, is this good or bad? And you can also say things like, here's what you might do next, right? And so I thought the probe could go after that. So you could keep the critical incident method, but you might ask things like what features were especially useful at that moment and why? What would have made it better or worse at that time and why? So you get a little richer response to pull for the kinds of things you want, not just was that a critical incident and did you discover that clicking on the right button made it easy. So the final contrast, I thought we could juxtapose critical incident methodology with vital. So critical incident and vital. Critical incident uses experiential. What was your experience doing this? Vital uses objectivist. How should I explain this phenomenon in front of me? The goal of the CIT is to demonstrate change, sort of in a clinical style. And the goal of vital is to describe thought. So sometimes I sort of wonder if these things are a mismatch, whether an objectivist approach, you want to actually demonstrate empirical sort of generalizable change, and experiential approach you want to use for describing thought. So I was wondering whether the evaluation should use clinical interviews, and it would make the whole package just smooth and perfect. But I'm not going to dare suggest that vital should use critical incidents. So conclusion, I thought this was exciting learning technology and an excellent progression of research. It went from a study of the design rationale to a study of the micro effects of some of the design elements that were decided on, a study of learning and changes over time, and then a study of class-level changes in the use of the technology. So it's an ideal progression for studying a technology in a learning environment. So overall, Herb, I'm going to give you an A-. How long have I wanted to do that? Why? I didn't see any alternative hypotheses considered. Thank you.